Okay, news story number one. A woman was stabbed in Hyde Park. Media and authorities are acting as if she had a come for wearing a Charlie Hebdo shirt. After a woman was brutally attacked at Hyde Park Speaker's Corner, reports about the incident focused on what she wore, begging the question whether free speech is no longer sacred to people who run London and the UK. A graphic video making rounds on social media shows a man reportedly dressed in a black robe with a hood punching and stabbing a woman on Sunday afternoon, then being chased away by police. He somehow evaded the authorities and disappeared, leaving the knife behind. Reports about the incident spoke of a 39-year-old woman who suffered a minor slash injury to her head, a quote, that was described as not life-threatening after treatment at a local hospital. The papers revealed no identifying information about the attacker and dutifully quoted the Metropolitan Police urging Londoners to come forth with evidence. I would ask people not to speculate on the motive for the attack until we have established the full facts, the police spokesperson concluded. That did not stop the media from pointing out that the woman wore a Charlie Hebdo top and reminding the public that the satirical French magazine was targeted by Islamic extremists in January 2015 over its cover depicting the Prophet Muhammad. The implication is clear. The woman wore a provocative shirt that offended Muslims somehow and therefore had the stabbing coming. The story only gets more troubling when some of the missing details are filled in. Even a cursory glance at the video and stills from the incident shows the woman wearing a top printed with a Charlie Hebdo cover, but not the one depicting the Muslim prophet. Instead, it showed a homosexual kiss between a Charlie Hebdo cartoonist and a Muslim preacher, captioned "Love Stronger Than Hate." While the authorities did not name the victim, bloggers and activists identified her as Hatun Tash, 39, who fled Turkey after renouncing Islam for Christianity. She now preaches in Hyde Park on behalf of Defend Christ Critique Islam Ministries. In countries practicing Sharia law such as Saudi Arabia, apostasy from Islam is a crime punishable by death. Turkey is nominally secular still, so is the UK, which is why the British authorities ought to be alarmed by this attack, but they don't seem to be. London Mayor Sadiq Khan, who once infamously said terrorist attacks were part and parcel of living in a big city, did not even acknowledge the incident. Instead, he demanded that police investigate a speech by an anti-vaxxer former nurse. According to one blogger, Tice has been a fixture at Speaker's Corner, facing intimidation, threats, sexual assaults and physical assaults in recent years. In October 2020, she was apparently assaulted and knocked unconscious. On another occasion, the blogger said she was detained by police and held for 20 hours without an explanation. Focusing on Tice's choice of clothing comes perniciously close to blaming her for provoking the attack somehow. Her top, or her words for that matter, may have been offensive to some Muslims, but they were not in violation of the law. One would expect the British public to show some solidarity with a woman attacked by a knife-wielding man in broad daylight for speaking at a place dedicated to free speech. There have been no calls for curfew on men in this time, however. Worse yet, violence is increasingly becoming the norm at Speaker's Corner. It has been reportedly seen multiple clashes in recent months between Shia and Sunni Muslims. Indeed, in one of the videos that captured the attack on Taish, the speakers in the foreground can be heard discussing Islamic theology. There is nothing wrong with that as such, so long as everyone understands that the laws, customs and traditions of Speaker's Corner, London and the UK take precedence over those they brought with them from abroad. Otherwise, what's next? Practicing Suti in Kensington Gardens in the name of diversity and inclusion? Right. That was from fucking Russia Today. RT.com. You couldn't get it picked up anywhere in mainstream British media. That a Christian woman is stabbed by a Muslim for talking or wearing a t-shirt. Either one is fucking patently ridiculous to stab someone because of that. Yet they either report it as she had it coming, don't report it at all, or in the case of fucking Sadiq Khan, they talk about an anti-vaxxer fucking nurse needs to be investigated by the pillars. Fuck me. Seriously, London, we need to just cordon London off from the rest of the UK and let them do their fucking thing. Because as long as shit like that is allowed to stand, there is no fucking hope. Right, so that's fucking story one out of the way. Oh, shit. I deleted it without copying the fucking link down to write in the description. Hold on a second. My story. Let me see, more recently closed. There we go. Right, now our second article. Let me just see if I can find the guy's name. Give him his dues. Simon Black from sovereignman.com. He's an international investor, entrepreneur. Writes a daily letter that is both educational and entertaining. Right, so today's letter is going to be about the Olympics. And I'm reading it from beforeitsnews.com. Late in the evening of October 17, 1534, a small group of Protestant activists swept across the 5 biggest cities in France, posting anti-Catholic propaganda posters all over town and major public squares. The activists even managed to brazenly nail one of their posters to the bedroom door of King Francis I, himself a Catholic. There were even rumours that the activists slipped their literature into one of the king's pockets as he slept. Francis was furious. He had always been tolerant of Protestants in his country and allowed people to worship freely at a time when religious tolerance was quite rare in Europe. But he felt the activists had gone too far, so he had them all tracked down and burned at the stake. As you do, you know what I mean? Someone puts up a poster, the natural response is to fucking burn them alive. Jesus Christ. This was merely an opening salvo in what would eventually become a full-blown civil war in France, known as the Wars of Religion between Catholics and Protestants. In retrospect, this may be one of the most pointless and idiotic civil wars in the history of Western civilization. You guys obviously never been to fucking Belfast. Both sides were French, a kingdom that has existed for centuries and enjoyed a strong national identity since at least the mid-1400s. Both sides spoke the same language, shared similar values, even religiously they both worshipped the same God, they both had faith in Jesus Christ, they both believed in heaven and hell. Their differences were minor, they had different customs and rituals, and they disagreed in small details like predestination, the infallibility of the Pope, or the supreme authority of the Bible over the authority of the Church. Yet, despite standing on the same ground on virtually 95% of everything, their 5% disagreement led to one of the deadliest wars in European history. More than 3 million died as a result of this pointless conflict, and it took decades for the violence to stop and the French economy to finally recover. I've thought about this history quite frequently over the past several months as a historical metaphor for our own time. That's not because of the level of violence or our own social conflict is mostly peaceful after all. Mostly peaceful. Fucking love it. From what I find most irritating about the extreme level of tension today is that, like the Catholics and Protestants from French history, people tend to agree on most things. For example, the vast majority of people in a civilized society today probably agree that racism is stupid and shouldn't exist. Duh. It seems like that should be the most important point and obvious common ground. Yet one side tells the other side, if you're not 100% on board with everything in our doctrine, then you're a white supremacist. And then crazy conflict ensues. School boards try to reinvent the entire education system and indoctrinate children with hardcore woke literature. Angry digital mobs swarm all over non-believers trying to ruin their lives and destroy businesses. And angrier mobs have rampaged through the streets, taken over government buildings and even declared their own autonomous zones. This is utterly ridiculous behaviour when you consider how closely aligned most people are on the most important points of the issue. Yet that small 5% difference has caused one side to completely spiral out of control and engage in de facto acts of terrorism, stoking fear through violence, threats, and intimidation in an effort to unilaterally dictate national policy. Compromise is out of the question, discussion is off the table, the fact that most people agree on probably 95% of the issue is totally irrelevant. Their only tactic is conflict, and every woke fanatic has enlisted as a foot soldier to wage a non-stop campaign of propaganda, fear, and public spectacle, and that includes celebrities, journalists, and athletes. Just take a look at the Olympics. No, seriously, take a look, because if you're like most people, you probably haven't been watching. TV ratings for the Olympics are at their lowest level in decades because everyone knows it's not about sports anymore. If you can manage to stomach the extreme lunacy of Japan's COVID protocol theatre, you then have to put up with a never-ending display of political protest. If you haven't vomited all over yourself by then, you'll then have to suffer the indignity of the NBC broadcast team's grovelling and virtue signalling. For example, we've seen one country's female, can you still use that word, gymnastics team change their competition uniform to skin-tight onesies with flesh-coloured plunging necklines. To them, this new sultry uniform is a protest against the sexualization of female gymnasts. The media, of course, is eating it up and praising these gymnasts for their bravery and courage. So stunning, so brave. Seriously, has the bar for courage been set so low that you get a gold star for putting on a sequined unitard? Then there were the judo competitors from two different countries, Sudan and Algeria, who refused to face an Israeli opponent, citing the Israeli government's activities in Palestine. Ironically, this is also the same reason why Ben & Jerry's wants to stop selling ice cream in Israel. But these examples don't even scratch the surface of the athlete protests. Of course, there's going to be a lot of kneeling during national anthems that's so commonplace it's almost passé now. NFL teams routinely take a knee for the national anthem if they bother taking the field at all, and even if you try to ignore it, the game announcers keep at-home viewers informed in real time, telling us which players are standing and which are kneeling. The NBA is even worse, where athletes flat out refuse to play as a form of protest. In completely unrelated news, NBA ratings are also at their lowest levels in decades. In fact, the most recent NBA finals averaged fewer than 10 million viewers, which is about 30% fewer people as watched a typical episode of Star Trek The Next Generation back in the 90s. It's also a fraction of what the NBA finals viewership used to be even a few years ago. Major League Baseball refuses to be left out in this terminal decline in viewership. You may recall that MLB's recent All-Star Game was supposed to have been played in Atlanta earlier this month, but the league decided to move the All-Star Game to Denver in order to protest a voting law passed by the state of Georgia, which had been called Jim Crow 2.0 by a bunch of people who didn't bother to actually read the text of the legislation. Had anyone bothered to read the law, they would have seen that it drastically expands voting and makes it much easier for people to cast their ballots. But that doesn't matter. Any voting law changes in 2021 are Jim Crow and un-American. So baseball jumped on board the ignorance train and staged its woke protest. Unsurprisingly, viewers of the All-Star Game plummeted to a record low, and this is good news. These dismal ratings are proof that ultra-woke loudmouths only constitute a tiny minority of the population. The bad news, however, is that they've managed to take over prominent institutions like education, media, technology, and big corporations. They refuse to see that the majority of people are good, decent, level-headed, who agree on the most important points of the issue. But 95% agreement isn't good enough for them, so they refuse to compromise. And just like the wars of religion in French history, the inability to compromise could make this ridiculous social conflict last for years, if not decades to come. Boom. Fucking guy nails it. Fucking mic drop. Boom. Simon Black. My personal metaphor for how things go is everything is on a pendulum. Everything. From Democrat, Republican, Labour, Conservative, Protestant, Catholic, black, white, gay, straight, whatever the pendulum is, it will always go back and forward. It will always go to one side, it'll get too extreme, people from the other side will push back, and it'll go back to the other side. And usually, the momentum, it loses a little bit of momentum every time. So eventually, we'll get to a point where we're at a happy ground for both. But these Antifa woke fucking Looney Tune brigade have went up to the pendulum and just went fucking whack to the point where it's out in fucking orbit somewhere, and there's no coming back from that, I think. I hope I'm wrong, but, well, we'll fucking see. About to reach the 15-minute mark, so that'll do us for now. Links to the articles will be in the description. Peace out, much love. If you feel so inclined, come over to Twitter, the Thekimora, Thekimora, all one word, where I'll be streaming the conclusion of Dragon Age Inquisition tonight. Pretty fucking soon. Peace out.